The title fight breakdowns are over, but there's still plenty left to get into for UFC 316, and we are going to start in the featured bout of the evening where Mr. B. Joe Pyfer, Mr. Dana White Contender Series himself is back in action, and he has been rebooked to take on Kelvin Gastelum in a fight that we were supposed to see earlier in the year. Joe Pyfer had to be pulled from that fight in Mexico due to falling ill. I believe it was some sort of food poisoning issue. So the UFC has saved the fight, put it here in Newark, New Jersey, and we will see the tough alum and longtime veteran Gastelum look to spoil the momentum of the 5 years younger Joe Pyfer with the momentum behind him. Yes, I just said that Joe Pyfer is 5 years younger than Kelvin Gastelum, but that's because Joe Pyfer is only 28 years old, hasn't even reached the 30-year mark yet. Kelvin Gastelum, somehow, someway, is just 33 years young, yet he has been in the UFC since April 13th of 2013, over 12 years ago now, still going strong, but a lot less green on the resume lately as there was back a decade ago. However, he does technically enter UFC 316, having won 2 of his last 3 fights. Most recently was in June of last year, almost 1 year ago on June 22nd, where he defeated Daniel Rodriguez via unanimous decision, and the other win was against Chris Curtis in April of 2023, and then sandwiched in between there was a loss to Sean Brady in December of 2023 via Kimura submission. So we just haven't been seeing Kelvin Gastelum with much activity as of late, partly due to his illnesses, his weight misses, his injuries, but also, like we saw earlier this year, Joe Pyfer had to be pulled from the fight. So it's not always Kelvin Gastelum's fault, but a lot of the times it is. And I know that I said there's not a lot of green on the resume as of late as compared to when he first broke into the scene as a rising prospect in the UFC, but let's just take a minute here to dive into the recent fights. I say recent, but we're going to go all the way back to 2017 here, but bear with me. The losses on Kelvin Gastelum's record over the last 8 years have been to Chris Weidman. That was back in 2017 when Chris Weidman was still fresh off of being a middleweight champion. In 2019, he went to war with Israel Adesanya for the middleweight championship of the world. Then he lost to Darren Till, lost to Jack Hermanson, a perennial top 15 fighter, lost to Robert Whittaker, former middleweight champion, lost to Jared Cannonier, former middleweight title challenger, lost to Sean Brady, a maybe future welterweight UFC champion. Are you seeing the level of competition that Kelvin Gastelum has been fighting? Yes, many of them have been losses, so all of that high-level experience, all of the fights going the distance, being in there for 25 minutes, being in there for a full 15 minutes, that's something we've seen his opponent Joe Pyfer struggle with most through his brief 5-fight UFC career thus far. Not to mention, the 5 fights on Joe Pyfer's record versus the record and resume of Kelvin Gastelum aren't even close if we're talking competition and name value. But Ford body bags Joe Pyfer. He is 4-1 in the UFC since breaking in 2022 following his huge victory on Dana White Contender Series in July of 2022. And he's coming off of a victory over Marc-Andre Barriault in June of last year, June 29th, when he knocked him out in the first round of their fight. But as I stated, his fight that went the distance, his first ever UFC main event that, let's be honest here in hindsight, I think it's safe to say he was thrust into much too soon against much too high of competition, Jack Hermanson, someone else that has also not only beaten Pyfer, but his opponent Gastelum. We would see Joe Pyfer find success, and a lot of it in the opening round of their fight, but ever so slightly picking him apart round by round from round 2 all the way through to the end in round 5, Jack Hermanson pulled away quite drastically in that fight en route to the unanimous decision victory. So now nearly after a year away from the octagon and coming in after an illness a couple of months ago in Mexico, is Joe Pyfer ready to take on the veteran and battle-tested Kelvin Gastelum? He seems to think so, and he seems to also believe he will be the first man to ever crack the jaw of Kelvin Gastelum enough to finish him by way of knockout, something that no one has ever been able to do before. But if anyone can do it, it will be Joe Pyfer, who has finished 9 of his 13 victories by way of knockout. And not to mention, he can get it done on the ground too, with 3 submissions to his name and only ever having 1 decision victory. Next up, we move to the most anticipated fight of the evening for me, title fights excluded, and that is the debut in the UFC of the former Bellator champion Patchy, who may just be the best bantamweight on planet Earth. But it's no easy debut, as he is taking on the number 10 ranked bantamweight in the world, who currently rides a 7-fight win streak. Most recently on that streak is a victory over the legend Jose Aldo. That is none other than Mario Bautista. The 31-year-old Bautista is right in his prime, and it shows over the course of this 7-fight win streak, with an overall record of 15-2, 9 of those wins by finish, 9-2 since making his entry into the UFC back in January of 2019. This man, fight by fight, is not only upping the level of competition, but upping his skill sets. He's got rear naked choke finishes. He's got flying knee finishes. He's got a reverse triangle armbar finish, and he's got wins over Jose Aldo. A lot of people hated that he won that fight and turned against Mario Bautista, the poor guy. Before that, he beat my man War Ricky Simone. Before that, beats Damon Blackshear. He's stacking names on his resume, and if he can beat Patchy Mix, he will level up in terms of relevancy and name value in this bantamweight division, and finally, in what would be his 8th straight win, get the respect that he has earned. But it will not be easy, because Patchy Mix is also in his prime and is also 31 years old with a record of 20 victories and just 1 defeat. He has not lost a fight since losing to Juan Archuleta in September of 2020, and since then has won 7 consecutive fights in his own right. Victories over former UFC title challenger Kyoji Horiguchi, finishes of Magomed Magomedov, Rafion Stotts, and Sergio Pettis, and then a second victory over Magomed Magomedov. And that second win against Magomed Magomedov was the last time that we've seen Patchy Mix in action, and that was over a year ago now, May 17th of 2024. We know all of the drama surrounding those Bellator fighters, specifically Bellator champions, that could not get fights under the PFL banner after the acquisition. We've seen Patricio Pitbull already make his way into the UFC. We've seen Aaron Pico, that wasn't a Bellator champion, but a very prominent Bellator name, express his frustrations, be released, and sign with the UFC, debut pending. And now we see Patchy Mix, who was also a champion like Patricio Pitbull, that never got to really defend his title under the PFL banner. He expressed his frustrations. He was granted his release. The UFC swooped in, as they rightfully should have, and now they have arguably the best bantamweight on planet Earth. But there's only one way to find out if he truly is the best, and that path to proving that point starts at UFC 316 against Mario Bautista. And it's a perfect debut card for Patchy Mix to get his name out there, because first off, he's on a pay-per-view main card in New Jersey. The man hails from New York, so he's in his home area, and he's fighting on the same card and the same main card, just 2 fights away from the main event in his own weight class between Merab Dvalishvili, a man that he has trained with numerous times up at Serra Longo, and Sean O'Malley, one of the biggest names in all of the sport, and definitely the biggest name at 135. If he launches himself right into the top 10 by beating Mario Bautista, stopping that 7-fight win streak that he comes in on, Patchy Mix can absolutely be catapulted right into title contention. In my opinion, we'll have to win 1 more fight to truly get to a title challenging opportunity, but it will not take long. Honestly, by the end of 2025, Patchy Mix could already be scheduled to face off against whoever the bantamweight champion may be at that point. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First, he has to prove himself against a top 10 fighter that is in his prime, much like Patchy, in Mario Bautista. Patchy Mix, if you have not seen him fight, has finished 15 out of 20 victories. He is a submission ace. He is very strong physically, has a great grappling game, but is very well versed on the feet too, and will never look like a fish out of water against any of these top 15 fighters, in my opinion. And similarly, Mario Bautista is pretty well versed in all facets of his mixed martial arts game. We saw him not utilize the most fun fight style and game plan to get the victory over Jose Aldo, but that was the most high pressure situation that he had found himself in, and he did what he had to do to get the nod over the legend. I am ecstatic for this fight, and you should be too. This is a huge opportunity for both guys. That's the fun part of this fight and the storylines behind it. Mario Bautista, can he halt the momentum of a champion from the B League in Patchy Mix and prove that there are levels to this game in the UFC, and specifically in the absolutely loaded UFC bantamweight division? Or can Patchy Mix prove that it's just a matter of time before he throws his name in the hat as the true best bantamweight in the world, and he gets to showcase that in the ultimate proving ground of the Ultimate Fighting Championship? championship. And finishing off the main card, or I guess I should say starting off the main card technically, is a very fun fight in the welterweight division between two OGs at this point, Vicente Luque, number 14 in the world at 170, and Kevin Holland, the most active fighter in UFC history. Luque will enter this fight looking to hold his spot in the top 15 at 170 and is coming off of winning 2 of his last 3 fights, most recently in December of last year at UFC 310, where he not only stopped the momentum of Themba Gorimbo, but finished him in less than a minute with an anaconda choke. His other victory in the last 3 was a decision over RDA, the former lightweight champion, and sandwiched in between was a loss to Joaquin Buckley, which continues to age like a fine wine because that man, come a couple weeks from now, actually 1 week from the time we're seeing the pay-per-view, will be in a main event against Kamaru Usman, and should he win there, the man could be challenging for a title next. Luque has finished 20 of his 23 wins. He's a kill or be killed style of fighter, and kind of similar to Kelvin Gastelum, all of the UFC experience and fights behind him, yet he's still just 33 years old. It's nearly been a decade, July 12th of 2015, since Vicente Luque debuted, and now he will look to hold his spot in the top 15 and take out a very dangerous opponent in Kevin Holland, one of the most fun fighters in the UFC, and a guy that surely doesn't know how to say no to accepting any type of fight. This will be Kevin Holland's 3rd fight in 2025 already, and we are just now starting the 6th month of the year. So we're technically not halfway through yet, which means he's technically on pace to have 6 fights this year. So far, he's 1-1. He kicked off the year with a loss at UFC 311 to Ranier de Ridder, which, similar to Vicente Luque's loss to Joaquin Buckley, this loss to Ranier is proving to age quite well. Plus, it was at 185 pounds. Kevin Holland can find the most success at 170. You can't convince me otherwise. Just see the fight against Gunnar Nelson a little over 2 months later in March of 2025 in London, where he beat Gunnar Nelson via decision, and honestly, he dominated that entire fight. Outside of the weird moment where Gunnar Nelson had him like up against the fence and hanging on by a thread, but pretty crazy moment. And while I'm not saying Kevin Holland can get another 5 victory year like he did in 2020, it's not out of the realm of possibility. If he wins here, he moves to 2-1 and has a chance to tally off 3 more wins and at least tie his 2020 record. But in all seriousness, I really want to see Kevin Holland take that next step and truly commit himself to chasing greatness, because he has the skill sets behind him and the athletic capabilities to do so, in my opinion, and to really climb the ranks at 170 pounds, which currently as it sits is the deepest it has ever been before. And similar to Vicente Luque, he is a finishing machine, having won 22 of 27 by way of stoppage with 14 knockouts and 8 submissions. I'm very curious to see how he will approach this fight. Luque's been utilizing a lot more grappling as of late, but will he do that against Kevin Holland, who is electric off of his back, dangerous with his elbows, dangerous with his fists, apparently, ask Jacare Souza, and can throw up submissions with those long legs at any moment. And on the feet, Kevin Holland is long, he is rangy, he is precise, and he's pretty technical for the most part, and carries sneaky good power. This fight is going to deliver no matter which way it goes. The fun doesn't stop on the main card, however. I want to talk about 4 more fights on the prelims that you should be on the lookout for, and the first is in the flyweight division between 2 top 15 fighters, Bruno Silva and Joshua Van. Oh, this is going to be so good. Before losing to Manel Kape in December of last year via TKO in the 3rd round, Bruno Silva was sneakily climbing his way up the flyweight ranks, had won 4 fights in a row, all by way of finish, over Cody Durden, Tyson Nam, Victor Rodriguez, and JP Bays. And yes, that momentum was halted, but it was halted by someone that may just become a future flyweight champion in Manel Kape, and now can Bruno Silva right the ship before he loses his 2nd consecutive fight? It's an uphill battle because Joshua Van is one of the best fighters on the roster, age 25 and younger. At just 23 years old, Joshua Van has already tallied off a 13-2 record, and in the UFC has 7 fights under his belt already with a 6-1 record. The only loss was to Charles Johnson, where he got knocked out in the 3rd round in a fight that he was winning. But that was in July of last year, and he stayed very active, having won 3 fights since then over Edgar Shirez, Cody Durden, and Ray Saruya. And you're going to be hard-pressed to find a fight that has even been close to boring for Joshua Van. This man puts out volume and numbers for days, and Bruno Silva is known to finish fighters in his own right. And although the 3 wins for Van have been 3 decisions in a row, he has finished overall 8 out of 13, and Bruno has finished 10 out of 14 and been finished finished in 3 out of 6 losses. And Van's been finished in both of his. So this is going to be very, very fun. Bruno Silva sitting at number 12, Joshua Van sitting at number 14 in a division that doesn't have that much depth in terms of numbers outside of the top 15. The victor here is only realistically 2 wins away from legitimate title contention, maybe less depending on the fashion in which they win. Next we move to the light heavyweight division where the 12th ranked 205er in the world will look to remain undefeated, Azamat Murzakanov, and in order to do so, he will have to stop the 2-fight win streak of the dangerous Brendson Ribeiro. Although Azamat is 36 years old, he seems to be finding plenty of success thus far in the UFC. He made his debut in March of 2022 following a Contender Series win in the fall of 2021, so he's 4-0 so far in the UFC. We just haven't seen a ton of activity from him, which is the problem in terms of his name value in this division and how quickly, or lack thereof quickness I should say, that he's been able to climb. But he's coming off of a victory over Alonzo Minifield last August where he knocked him out in the second round and has finished 3 out of 4 fights overall in the UFC. And the Gorilla Brendson Ribeiro, at 28 years young, has finished 16 out of 17 fights thus far. Even though he started his UFC career 0-2, he has since flipped the tide, the table has turned, and he now has won back-to-back fights. First was a split decision over Caio Machado, and then his most recent win just came in March, where he finished Dayar Nergozai in the second round with a Kimura submission. Will Ribeiro be the first man to successfully defeat Azamat Murzakanov? And if he is, he will launch himself into the top 15 of the light heavyweight division. We've got a very slept-on fight in terms of importance for the heavyweight division, believe it or not, even though it's had a very lackluster year thus far in 2025, partly because I guess we're just waiting on John Jones and Tom Aspinall to fight. That'll never happen. I hope I just jinxed myself and we do get to see it. You get the point. Heavyweight has been brutal in 2025, but here's a bright shining part of it. Number 7, Serghei Spivac, and number 11, former Major League Baseball pitcher Waldo Cortes Acosta. Well, technically he was signed to the minor leagues of the Cincinnati Reds, but you get the point. The Polar Bear enters this fight having lost 2 of his last 3. The most recent was against Jailton Almeida in January at UFC 311, where he was finished with 7 seconds left in the first round. The other loss was to Cyril Gahn. He got finished in the second round via TKO. I mean, those are 2 guys that, well, one has been an interim champion and the other could be a champion in the future in Almeida, and the victory sandwiched in between was a very impressive outing against the veteran Marcin Tybura, where he finished him in the first round with an armbar. And he also holds wins over Alexei Olenek, Derek Lewis, and Augusto Sakai, so Spivac has been in there against high-level competition, something that Cortes Acosta can't really say he has. But I will say that quietly, Waldo has garnered a record of 6-1 in the UFC since debuting in October of 2022, so he's been one of the more active fighters on the heavyweight roster over the last few years, and the only loss came to Marcos Rogério de Lima, where he lost a decision. But since then, he has won 4 fights in a row. The most recent was against Ryan Spann in his heavyweight debut, and Waldo dominated that fight en route to the second round TKO finish. This is a big spot for Serghei to hold his spot amongst the top 10, and for Waldo to break into the top 10, and in this division that does not have a lot of moving pieces and isn't that deep, if you break into the number 7 spot and you win 1 more, you're right there amongst the title contenders. And last but not least, I expect a very fun fight in the women's flyweight division as the number 13 ranked Ariane da Silva, formerly known as Ariane Lipski, will be taking on Wang Tong. Ariane broke into the top 15, winning 4 out of 5 fights between September 2021 and December of 2023, capping that win stretch out with a victory over Casey O'Neill, where she not only won, but finished her via armbar. But since then, it has been downhill, with an 0-2 year in 2024, losses to Karine Silva and Jasmine Jasdavicius. Granted, both of those losses are aging quite well, especially the loss to Jasmine. It is a moment for Ariane to defend her spot in the top 15 before she dips back out. And Wang Tong took the UFC by storm in her debut last August, where she had a one-punch knockout over Victoria Leonardo just 1 minute and 2 seconds into their fight. And yes, the momentum was quickly halted in her second UFC stint by losing to Gabriela Fernandez, being finished albeit, but she did bounce back, and as you can see, this will be her 4th fight since joining the promotion last August, with a win over Bruno Brazil in February. Now she will look to make it 2-0 in 2025 and break into the flyweight top 15, which is a pretty big deal considering she has a victory over the current flyweight queen Valentina Shevchenko back in their kickboxing days. And if she can continue to stack wins and Valentina continues to remain the champion, you bet your ass the UFC will try to get this fight happening in the UFC, just like they did with Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. So that is it for the UFC 316 breakdown. A very stacked card from top to bottom in Newark, New Jersey, with a lot of underrated, slept-on fights that have a lot of stakes behind them. I want to hear from you all. Give me your predictions for all of these fights down in the comments below, alongside with your bets. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because every single week I upload breakdowns and previews of all of the best fights, including the storylines and what is at stake heading in, and I recap the most meaningful results in the aftermath of each card, as well as give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the discussion and the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.